Hi, I'm Lori Pickens, a photographer and photo educator. I'm passionate about helping photographers just like you get profitable and productive in their own businesses. As a mom to 3 kiddos, I know how hard it can be to juggle all the demands of life. But I also know that it's possible to have a successful business and a happy family. And that's why I created Photo Goals, a podcast for creative business owners who want to learn tangible steps to automate their business through workflows, systems, tools, and strategy in order to go from scattered to streamlined with purpose. On each episode, I'll share simple, actionable strategies and systems that photographers at every level of experience can use. No fluff, just the good stuff. I can't wait to help you achieve your photography goals. Let's do this. Hey there, creative friends. Welcome back to Photo Goals, the show where we dive deep into all things photography and help you turn your passion into reality. Today, we're going to talk about taking an exciting step and venturing into the realm of brick-and-mortar dreams. That's right, planning your very own photography studio. Whether you're a seasoned pro or ready to level up, or just a budding entrepreneur with a vision, setting up a studio can be both thrilling and daunting. But fear not, I'm here to guide you through the key steps and considerations, helping you to navigate this exciting stage with confidence. I have had, a handful of different studio setups over the years. I started my business officially in 2010. So here we are, 14 years later. I've had an in-home studio. I have had actually 2 different rented studio spaces. One that I shared with another photographer friend in town, so a shared studio space. And now we finally have a dedicated studio space right outside my house. So we're going to talk about the different choices between them, things to consider when planning a space, when choosing a space, and basically all the pros and cons that I've learned along the way. So first thing is location, location, location. This one is crucial. Will this be a dedicated space or is it a home-based? Each option has its own perks and drawbacks. A dedicated studio space offers a professional separation, but home might be more budget-friendly. Considering factors like accessibility, parking, and overall vibe, and remember that your studio can inspire both you and your clients. My first official studio was in our home. When we built our house back in 2010, we picked house plans with the idea of a studio in mind. So there was a couple of bedrooms and a hallway, and we had them combine into one space when they built our home, knowing that that's where I wanted to put my studio. And for the most part, it worked really well. It was a large enough space. For me, I like to have a lot of separation between my client in the background and me and my client. So it's more important for me to have a long space rather than a wide space, just to have that separation with a background. Some of the pros and cons of having an in-home studio. One, it was very convenient because I never had to drive 2 sessions. I felt like I was more flexible as far as when people could, people were 10 minutes late, 2 minutes early. It wasn't a huge deal because I was basically always already here. Drawbacks. I did feel, an extra pressure of having my house clean, knowing that people were going to have to come into my house, go upstairs to this separate room. There was also the, burden that I felt like it put on my family if they were home. My husband and I both work from home. So, obviously there's strangers in his house while he's trying to work and, walk around the house and do his thing. And the same with my children. If I had a newborn up there at the time, my kids, if they were home, at the time the boys were, probably just toddlers. So you have that, mommy's working, but I'm still in the house. So, kind of that confusing time, which can be for little kids as far as, yes, but if this door's closed, then, I'm working and I need you not to come in and interrupt and things like that. So, or, you have to be downstairs in the basement because mommy's upstairs with the baby trying to keep it asleep. Overall, the in-home studio worked well. It met my needs at the time. And then my husband and I decided we wanted a 3rd child. So when we decided to start trying, actually another photographer had just moved to town, and it worked out timing-wise well that she and I had started talking about sharing a studio space in town. So Next, we'll talk about a rented space. Obviously, the pros are that, it's not in my home. When I went to the space, there was a clear separation. Things were there. Home life was here. It was easier to kind of compartmentalize those things and not have the carryover of impact on my family as well. So obviously you have a payment that you are making every single month. So you need to factor that into your cost of doing business ahead of time. Whether or not you have a slow month or a busy month, you're paying that rent. I am a person that believes highly in making decisions based on facts and data. So I would say if you're looking into getting a studio space, have 6 months of rent set aside. Go ahead and assume, okay, if I was paying $500 a month in rent, pretend like you already have that. And every month, put that money aside into a separate account that you don't even consider into your planning or budgeting and things like that, so that you can prove to yourself that, in fact, you can cover that cost of rent and make it beneficial and make it worth it. Now, I understand, I got through this myself with the current studio that we have is, oh, well, I could make more money if I have the studio space, which is probably true. And I have learned that over the last couple of months of having even this studio in progress. So I understand the idea that maybe you feel like you can't set that money aside until you're able to use the studio space to make that money. But I do think that you need to go into the decision confidently that you aren't getting in over your head or are committing to things that you can't sustain. So as I mentioned, I shared my studio space with another photographer in town, which both had its positives and negatives. So on one hand, we basically doubled all of our props and backgrounds and equipment because we both had lights, we both had backgrounds, things like that. And we were good friends. So we went into it kind of with a mutual respect of, I'm going to take care of your stuff, you're going to take care of my stuff. We were very good at communicating with each other and saying, hey, I'm going to do this today. At the time, she was a full-time photographer. I was a part-time photographer. So she did pay more of the rent than I did because she used the space more. So there's just a lot of those logistics that you have to work out. And whether you're friends or just business partners, there's a lot of emotions and those kind of things that can come into play that you don't want to ruin a relationship over. I would say put out up front what you are and are not okay with. What are you okay with sharing? What are you not okay with sharing? If things are broken, if things are damaged, how are you going to rectify that? Obviously we both carry insurance. So if a light or something like that happened to get knocked over and broken, which thankfully as long as we were there, nothing substantial was ever lost or broken. But basically, how would you handle that? I had newborn felt props and, she had a toddler in there and he got hold of one and pulled the head off the teddy bear. She offered to replace that because, again, it was technically on her during her session time and it was my prop and things like that. But, after, we shared a space for years, we got to the point that we couldn't even remember whose was what, especially if there are things like newborn wraps and, little buckets and baskets and things like that. Whose even was this to begin with? So if that kind of thing is important to you and you do feel like you're going to take it personally, if you feel like your boundary space is being taken advantage of or something like that, I do think you need to make that clear up front. I think it's also very important to have a clearly defined schedule. Have a shared calendar or a way that you both define who's using the space when and what the priority list is for that. I will say that one of the best things about sharing the space with my friend is that we were able to collaborate, and I think it felt less overwhelming maybe even than the space that I have now where it's just me making all of the decisions. But we kind of had hey, this is what I'm thinking. Does this make sense to you? Or if I put this here, what am I not thinking about? So it was kind of nice to have that. I think we all have that when we go through entrepreneurship of that, you're out on this island making these decisions. So it was kind of fun to plan and do that thing with a friend. ultimately, it worked out well for both of us in the fact that in 2019, at the end of the year when our lease was up, we kind of mutually decided to let go of the space. For me, the location was on the other side of town from me. It was about a 20-minute drive, which isn't huge, but I found myself not using the space as much because I had to plan out, okay, well, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to have to pack up my camera and my stuff and go over there to do something. Or, it just didn't make sense to do quick and easy little things that I used to shoot in my house all the time because it was on the other side of town. And for her, she was struggling, I think, with entrepreneurship and schedule and budgeting and things like that. And she decided to go back to teaching just to have a more predictable schedule and things like that for her work-life balance. And obviously, we all know now that, 2020 came and COVID hit and things like that. And we were very lucky that we had expired our lease and weren't paying a rent cost all through COVID and shutdown. And, those times that I know a lot of other businesses struggled that had a brick and mortar space. So you do have to kind of plan in for, obviously, no one could have planned for COVID and the impacts of that. But you do have to plan for, what am I going to do in slow season? What am I going to do if I get sick and I still have to pay rent when I'm not going? Or there are just a lot of commitments that you bought into when you have a lease and a rent and things like that. And obviously, location came into a big play here because when we picked the spaces that we had in town, they were great in the fact that the one was kind of right across from the mall, so it was more high traffic and you're being seen more and things like that. But for me, I found that it was less convenient for me. So I do think, depending on your area, you probably want to do some research of, is a higher traffic area going to give me more visibility versus is it convenience versus visibility and traffic and things like that? Obviously, you also need to take into consideration things like accessibility and insurance. And if someone trips and falls and hurts themselves in my studio, is that on you? Is that, do you have the correct insurance and type of business to be able to handle those types of problems if they happen? Okay. So finally, where we are today is a dedicated space. We built a barn outside of our home. I call it a barn because it's a pole barn is the structure. And the inside is going to be a finished studio space for me, which I'm very excited to have. And again, you kind of have that nice convenience factor of it's right outside. So, if I pick up a headshot during the middle of the day, it's no big deal that, I go outside for 15 minutes and I come back in. And it's much easier for me to pick up little jobs here and there for those kind of things. I also love the fact that I can set up the space the night before and just kind of leave it there and just know that my next day, if you're a planner like me, I know if I have an 11 o'clock session, I can't even do other things. Even if I know it's only going to take me 20 minutes to set up the space, I'm a person that can't relax until that job is, I'm the opposite of a procrastinator in that situation, is that I'd like to have it all set up and ready to go. That it's harder for me to concentrate or write a blog post or do something else, knowing that I still have to go out there and get the space ready. It's kind of that you plan your time backwards of, well, I know I have to leave 20 minutes early. So, and it takes us 10 minutes to get in the car, and then it's going to take us a half an hour shower. And, you kind of back plan your time. So I like the idea that I can do all my setup, have it out there, have it ready, have everything that I need. And I think it just makes me feel more calm about the day and using the rest of my time proactively to do other things. So that's one downside of having either an in-home studio space or even a dedicated space that's on your property, like mine is now, is if people didn't show up early, if it's a studio or you're meeting even a client like at a park or something like that, if they show up early, you're like, great, I'm on my way. I'll see you in 20 minutes as we agreed to. Not that I don't usually go a little bit early, but I've had people show up a lot early. And, you're here, whether you're dressed or makeup on or camera or batteries ready, that kind of thing. So you do have to deal with the unexpected. I know when I had an in-home studio and I had our current address listed, we would have people just drop by. Even though my Google My Business listing says by appointment only, you would have people just show up saying, hey, like you were a Walmart photo student, like, hey, let's take our pictures right now. I'm like, no. Like, so there is that kind of both safety concerns and also just your own schedule and the inconvenience of if people show up and you're at space, what does that look like? And obviously that's the same thing if you have a brick and mortar studio in town. If you work from that studio, you will have people drop by or walk in or pop their head in that can cause interruptions that maybe you welcome or not welcome. So once you've decided where your studio space is, there's a lot that goes into planning the actual space. We're thinking lighting, backdrops, props, furniture, the whole creative playground. If that's to prioritize your needs based on your niche and your clientele, do you do newborns? Do you do family? Do you do headshots, branding? Maybe something unique like you do products or pets, or there's a lot of things that you could do. And it's best to decide what your main focus is. What purpose is the space going to serve for you? And then start with the essentials and then gradually add and create your signature style based on what is most important. Remember, quality matters, but don't break the bank. We want to research, compare, and then find the sweet spot. I think I find this most with newborn because there are so many props and wraps and things that you could buy, and kind of finding that balance of how many do I need to be able to fulfill my client's needs versus what do I want to be able to fulfill my creative soul and not get burned out or not get bored. So with everything in business, I feel like it's best to start with a plan and a budget and kind of work back the steps that you need to do. So with my own current photography studio in mind, I sat down and made a list of all of the things that I did want to buy. Everything from, what type of flooring did I want? What type of lighting did I want? What type of storage did I need? And to kind of prioritize that in terms of need, want, nice to have kind of things. And I think once you are able to kind of map that out and put it into perspective, like, yes, I would like this newborn heart bowl, but at the same time, and it's only $30 or $50, whatever it is. But if you're thinking big things, heating and cooling, landscaping, you may never get to do those big ticket items that may fulfill a longer term need if you don't prioritize and maybe put off some of these smaller purchases that are nice to have. So in talking about some of the bigger choice items that you can make with the rented studio spaces, obviously we went into them with decisions already made of, how tall are the ceilings, or what are we and are we not allowed to do to the walls, things like that. And with my new studio space, basically I had a blank canvas. So I definitely took more time to research and make what I felt were the best choices. When I researched overhead lights, basically I decided that I wanted light bulbs that most mimicked outside natural light. And the lights that I ended up going with are actually called daylight bulbs, and they're 5,000 Kelvin. So they're close to what the temperature of light outside would be. Most splash studio strobes will overpower any kind of overhead light, but you can still have white balance issues or just negative impacts from your lighting. I really like, in my current studio, we have 3 sets of lights that go across the ceiling. I asked my brother-in-law, who did most of my studio work, to actually put them on separate light switches. I actually prefer not to have overhead lights on when I'm shooting. I know a lot of my natural light photographers or lifestyle in-home photographers, that's one of the things that they first do when they go in is they say, let's turn off all the overhead lights. Let's turn off all the lamps and things like that that might cause color cast or shadows or things like that you don't want. Even in my studio that has natural light on the back side, as the sun goes down sometimes in the evenings when we've had sessions, my camera will have a hard time focusing because, the flash isn't going off when it's trying to focus and things like that. So I like to have adjacent lights on, but not the overhead lights on. So that's one nice thing that I love about my studio. When we did flooring, obviously I wanted something that was durable. Clients coming in with shoes on. I actually let pets in the studio, if a family wants to bring a dog or something like that. Obviously, I control well-behaved pets, I should say. But, they have nails or, a person could have a rock in their shoe and things like that. So I got it looks like hardwood, but it's actually like an engineered hardwood. But I basically wanted something that was easy to clean and durable. My walls in this studio are actually white. I think that's my biggest pet peeve when I do go other places and that have colored walls is color casts that come off of them. So I knew that I wanted a neutral wall color. I know when we had the one studio in town, we had kind of a cream, like a warm color. So if it did have a cast, it was going to be a nice, pleasant warming factor. My current studio has 10-foot ceilings, but in some of the ones that we had in town, they were 8 or 9-foot ceilings. And that does play a factor into, if you shoot families, how high you can have your backgrounds behind them, especially, if you have like tall moms or dads or something like that. We had parents come in that were 6'5", and, you want that background to be taller than dad. So, I have an Alzo, I think it's not how you pronounce it. It's a backdrop holder system that can be either mounted to the wall or to the ceiling, and then it holds this Savage seamless background papers. And it's interesting in the studio currently. So we have a mount that will hold 6 is what we used to use in town. And so there were 6 papers all lined up. And so obviously you could only have one at a time, but they have a pulley system on the side. So it's easy to swap out colors during the session. But I will say, I kind of learned over this current winter that this is the largest studio space that I have had. My current space is 24 by 38. So I had multiple sets, if you will, at the same time. And it was really nice to be able to go from one to the other without changing anything, without rolling up paper, without changing out a backdrop. But again, it's a nice to have, not a have to have. For years I had a smaller space and you made it work. So I think that's one of my biggest things that I've learned, and advice that I would give is don't be afraid to adapt, experiment, and personalize the space as you go. Use it a few times before you make permanent decisions. The Alzo system mounts to the ceiling. So my husband's kind of got it up there and he's got it in place and he's got it secure, but we don't have the ceiling tiles in, and because I want to use the space and decide, do I want all 6 papers in a row? Actually, what I'm thinking right now is I want 3, and then I'm going to put 3 either beside it where I can have 2 seamless colors out and ready to go at the same time, or put one kind of over to the side. Just use the space a few times in the layout that you think that you're going to want it before you nail things to the wall, before you overcommit into purchases or things that will make the space less flexible for you in the future. I know when I first, started planning the studio space and we were working towards it, things like that, I looked into these, I think you call them cyc walls, where it's basically instead of having, a floor to a separate wall, it's like a curved wall, and they're gorgeous. I love photos that I see with them. And this idea of, it's going to make my editing so much easier because you're not going to have that harsh shadow line. And I talked to my husband and brother-in-law, and they were like, yeah, we can totally do that. Research all this stuff of how to build one and things like that. And I reached out to some photographers and photographer spaces that have them. And they were like, yeah, they're wonderful, but they're a lot of upkeep and maintenance. It sounds like basically like drywall all the way down. So you're basically having people walk on what is a background, and they have to paint them all the time, and they have to. And ultimately, I decided it wasn't worth the headache of having to maintain them and paint them and keep them looking nice, especially the white on white, which is the kind of the look that I liked. I know the one photographer space that I talked to, she lives in a bigger city, and they actually rid the space to other photographers, but she basically blocks it off. And it's like museum style ropes when the space isn't being used because she doesn't want people to even walk on it unless they're shooting on it because it's so hard to clean up afterwards and things like that and to maintain it. And that's just not my style and my brand. Like one of the things that I pride myself most on is being a very low stress photographer. And like, I don't want moms to feel like they have to, oh my gosh, my child's in the space and he's going to touch something that he's not supposed to touch. I like that, we had a 20-month-old in the studio on Saturday, and I like that little guy can walk around and, I can take pictures of mom and dad together and her not feel like, oh my gosh, she's going to destroy something. So I prefer to have a more functional, useful space and work ahead of time to put things away, to put things that I'm worried about getting broken or knocked over. I would rather plan to put those into a cabinet that's shut and locked and whatever you need to do, rather than having, this immaculate space that feels less kid-friendly to me. But that's my brand. Maybe if you're a brand photographer and you only have mostly adults in there that, you want a high-end studio look and feel, then that's going to have a different vibe than if you're a motherhood photographer and have little kids in there all the time. So speaking of that, there are all kinds of decisions to be made about what you are and are not going to have in the space. When I shared the rented space with a photographer friend, she did in-person sales. So she had people come back to the studio for a session review their images and place their order and things like that. So we planned to have a space that basically would entertain the kids while their parents were doing that. We had like a little tiny kitchenette and like a little tiny table the kids could sit and color in and things like that. And I'm still trying to decide now whether I want to put something like that in my space, because it is nice if you are shooting the other siblings or the parents for the little kid to have a space that they're drawn to naturally. But at the same time, you don't want it to be a distraction. If I'm trying to take the 2-year-old picture and all he wants to do is go over and play on my tool bench that's designed for children to go play with, that may be harder to get him focused on what we need him to do and things like that. So I think there's kind of a balance of what are you going to use the space for? Maybe even ask the parents ahead of time. Is this going to be a problem if this is out? Maybe you just put a blanket over top of it so it doesn't draw them in, or you get it out and you put it away depending on your need. For the several years that I didn't have a studio, I still used my now daughter's bedroom, which used to be my in-home studio, for newborns. And one thing that I do really like about it is we have a big nursery rocking chair that's up there, and it's like a Pottery Barn comfy one. We had twins, so I got a wider chair so that I would be able to nurse them both at the same time. And it's in my daughter's room now. But it is really nice when parents come, especially moms that are, recovering, that might be sore and things like that. For her to be able to sit in a comfortable chair to nurse the baby to do feedings in between sets if needed. So I'm considering taking that chair to the studio, but it is big, and you kind of have to weigh in your space functionality versus comfort and what matters to you. Is part of your brand that you're going to make that mom feel luxurious and comfortable during the session? Do you have a mini fridge with water and snacks and things like that while she's sitting and waiting? Versus do you have a couple maybe smaller office-looking chairs that parents can sit in, but it's not taking up so much space that you need in order to do the things to accomplish the session? Client closet is another big one to decide on and what is important. My client closet is used most for maternity. I feel like that has been more popular and more in demand than, say, sitter sessions or even little girl dresses and things like that. I think probably because all of us moms are more willing to buy stuff for our kids. We don't think twice about, splurge on the dress for my daughter, as opposed to maybe a maternity dress that I know in 10 months I'm not going to wear anymore. So whether it's maternity gowns or newborn props or backdrops or lighting equipment, make yourself a list of all the things that you want to buy. Make it a dream list, and then prioritize which ones are most important to you. I have mentioned before on the podcast that I follow the profit first system. So basically I have a separate account that I move money to as I finish sessions and things like that. And I've kind of made the self-imposed rule that until the money is there, I can't buy whatever that next item is. So it continually kind of motivates you towards those goals that you set, towards the budget that you set out for yourself. And maybe that even means that you really want something, so you hustle more for a month. Maybe you do model calls. Not all model calls has to be a free situation. Maybe you do maternity model calls to photograph the client's closet that you have, and you include 2 or 3 images free, and then you try and upsell the rest of the gallery. And the profit that you do make from those model calls, you can put towards building the client closet out further. I know I'm that way right now with my newborn props and all the things that I'm excited to buy to have more variety for myself. A lot of times parents don't care that you've used that same bonnet 3 times this month, or that you're ready to try a new color or a new special basket, because most of the time they don't pay enough attention to know that you're reusing the same prop over and over again. So you have to find that balance between serving yourself and serving your client and what makes the most business sense. I always believe in being open to feedback, both from clients and colleagues. Maybe make a questionnaire that you send a client after they come into your studio for, hey, what could have been better? Or were there any places that you felt uncomfortable that would have made more sense to you? Maybe have model calls with friends or other people that you feel more comfortable having that kind of candid conversation with. I hope this episode has empowered you to take the first steps towards building your dream photography studio. Remember, believe in your vision, stay organized, and of course, enjoy the process. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Photo Goals. If you enjoyed this content, it would mean the world to me if you left a review or send this to your business bestie. Be sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. And as always, check out the show notes for links to all my resources and info. And as I tell my kids every day, be kind and make good choices.
Thanks for listening to Guiding Leader